Amma felt bitter as the day, which was supposed to be a day of joy, turned out to be the complete opposite, as her children were not given the royal welcome that they deserved. Once upon a time, there lived a very beautiful girl named Mma. Mma was by far the most beautiful girl in the village, who was admired by all. Her beauty was so irresistible that it caught the attention of the young king, who decided to make her his queen. After her marriage to the king, Mma became the most beautiful queen who had ever ruled the kingdom. Her husband, King Ikenga, carried her everywhere that he went because he was so proud to have a very beautiful woman as his queen. The king could not wait for his home to be filled with beautiful children, as that had been his dream for a very long time. So, when he heard that his queen was pregnant with child, he threw a great feast to celebrate the conception of his royal baby. The entire village jubilated as they celebrated with their king, who was over the moon as he fantasized about his baby inheriting the unparalleled beauty of his queen. A few months later, on one fateful night, the queen went into labor and gave birth, not to one but 3 children. However, to the king's utmost surprise, the children did not look anything like their beautiful mother. They were quite the opposite, each with their own unique features that were far from the kingdom's standard of beauty. King Ikenga, on seeing his babies, said no word to his wife as his heart sank. He returned back to his chamber and for days refused to see his wife, the queen, or their babies. Queen Mma felt bitter as the day, which was supposed to be a day of joy, turned out to be the complete opposite, as her children were not given the royal welcome that they deserved. Days became weeks, and the king avoided the presence of his children. He ordered that the children be kept away from the public and prohibited the entire palace from talking about the children to anyone outside the palace grounds. The entire village was now in the dark as they wondered why the palace was silent about the birth of the royal baby. All they were told was that the queen had put to bed, but no one knew that the queen gave birth to triplets. The villagers began to peddle rumors that the royal baby might have died during childbirth, as they wondered why the palace was being so secretive about the birth of the royal child. Queen Amma, despite seeing the king's attitude towards her newborn babies and herself, loved her triplets with all of her heart. She would sing them to sleep at night, and their laughter was a melody that filled her heart with joy. Weeks turned into months, and months into years, but still the king avoided his children like a plague. He never interacted with them or paid any form of attention to them, and the children grew up lacking the love of their father, the king. They would often ask their mother why their father hated them so much, and their mother would make excuses, reassuring them of their father's love for them. The birth of the triplets put a wedge between the queen and the king, who argued at every given opportunity. King Ikenga stopped going to public functions with his beautiful wife Amma, and this raised suspicion as the people wondered what could have gone wrong. One day, the king announced that he was taking on a new wife. The entire village was in shock as the king presented them with another beautiful maiden who he planned on making his second wife. Queen Amma was so heartbroken as she watched the king shower his second wife with so much love, a love she once enjoyed until the night she gave birth to her babies. Heartbroken and dejected, Queen Amma poured all her love on her daughters. Although they lacked the physical beauty of their mother, they possessed her warmth, kindness, and wisdom. The queen taught them that beauty is not seen but felt with the heart, and with her guidance, they each grew into decent young women. The king's second wife, Udo, would oftentimes laugh at the triplets, calling them names. She mocked their looks as she wondered how a beautiful woman like Amma would give birth to extremely ugly daughters. Despite her mocking remarks, the triplets ensured that they remained respectful towards her as their mother taught them the importance of respect. Not long afterwards, the king's second wife Udo became pregnant, and the king was so excited as he could not wait to finally have a child that he could be proud to flaunt to the entire village. The triplets, on seeing how their father ignored them in the palace, decided to approach him one morning to apologize for any wrong that they may have unknowingly caused him. With tears in their eyes, they stood before their father, who had never looked them in the eye since birth. "Father," they said in one voice, "we do not know what we have done to earn your disdain, but we feel the weight of it every passing day. Please, tell us how we can make amends, for we long for nothing more than to be worthy of your love and to bring pride to our kingdom." King Ikenga, on hearing this, told the triplets to their faces that he regretted the day that they were born and that he struggles to believe that they were his children because of how ugly they were. The triplets were heartbroken to hear this from their father, who sent them away from his sight. They rushed to their mother, who comforted them and reminded them of how beautiful they were. She told them to promise her that they would never doubt their beauty or feel less of themselves again, and the triplets promised their mother never to feel less of themselves again. A few weeks later, the king's second wife, Queen Udo, gave birth to a baby boy, and the king was so excited to finally see his son, who would be the heir apparent to the throne. The whole palace was silent as they anticipated the king's joyous dance, which was a customary dance the king was meant to dance after he set his eyes on his child. As the whole palace waited in anticipation, they heard a loud scream of terror, followed by the king, who ran away from Queen Udo's chamber in fear. The queen had given birth to the ugliest baby the king had ever seen, and everyone wondered why, owing to the fact that the king and his queens did not look anything like the children they were birthing. Queen Udo, on seeing her son, screamed in fear, as she never imagined that she would ever give birth to an ugly child like Queen Amma, who she had mocked on several occasions. In his quiet chamber, King Ikenga remembered an incident that occurred many years ago, where an extremely ugly woman mistakenly splashed some water on his clothes when he was taking a stroll around the village. She approached him to plead for mercy, but the king lashed out at her as he mocked her looks, calling her an ugly animal. The poor woman wept and uttered a word saying that the king would one day be in her shoes, and the king laughed to her face, saying that it was impossible for him to ever have an ugly offspring because he was the king who had the power to choose the most beautiful women as his queen. The king, now facing the result of his own cruelty, understood the curse he had unknowingly brought upon himself. His cruel words to the poor woman had come back to haunt him in a way that he never imagined possible. A few days later, the king received an unexpected visitor in his palace. Usually, whenever the king was expecting a visitor, he ordered that the triplets be locked away in their room. But on this fateful day, he was caught unaware as the king of the neighboring village had an urgent matter he had to discuss with the king. His only son was extremely sick, and he was told that the cure to his son's sickness was in the palace of King Ikenga. So the king arrived at the palace with his son, who was on the brink of death. They arrived at the king's palace and met the triplets, who sat in a corner, singing some sweet melodies. As the triplets were singing, the king noticed that his sick son was gradually regaining his health. The more they sang, the more his son's strength returned. Shortly afterwards, his son regained his health completely, and the king could not help but ask who the triplets were. "They healed my son," he said, as he approached King Ikenga, who looked at him in confusion. "What are you talking about?" King Ikenga asked, as the king narrated how the melodies of the triplets healed his only son, who was at the brink of death. King Ikenga began to panic as he feared what would become of him when the people realized that his children were all born ugly. Filled with fear and shame, King Ikenga could no longer keep his secret. The neighboring king's proclamation had brought the entire palace to a standstill. All eyes turned to the triplets, who until that moment had been hidden away, their existence barely acknowledged by their father the king. "I cannot hide the truth any longer," King Ikenga confessed aloud as he revealed that the triplets were his daughters, who he had kept away from the world because of his own pride and shame. The neighboring king was shocked. "You hid such treasures away from the world?" he exclaimed. "These young women possess a miraculous gift. Their voices not only bring joy, but healing. They are not a shame to your name, but a blessing to any land." These words struck King Ikenga with a force of a thunderbolt. He had been so consumed with superficial appearances that he had failed to recognize the true gifts his daughters possessed. The triplets, with their songs, had done what no powerful healer could, as they saved the life of the dying prince. Filled with remorse for his actions, King Ikenga turned to his daughters with tears in his eyes. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked, as his daughters could not believe that their father had finally acknowledged them as his own. Their mother, Queen Ama, who stood by and watched, spoke up and said, "Our children have always been a source of light and love, even when they were kept in the shadows. It is time for us to show them off to the world, as they deserve to be seen and not hidden." From that day on, the triplets were no longer hidden. They were celebrated throughout the kingdom. Their melodious songs were sought after by all, as it sent instant healing to those in need of it. The king's second wife, Queen Udo, humbled by her own child's appearance, learned to see beyond the surface just as King Ikenga had. The two queens, once rivals, found common ground in their love for their children and worked together to foster a kingdom where all were valued for their inner worth. King Ikenga, humbled by the turn of events, dedicated himself to being a true father to his children, who he learned to love with all of his heart. The lesson to be learned from this story is that true beauty goes beyond physical appearances. Do not dictate your worth based on your reflection in a mirror, but by the depth of your soul and kindness within your heart. Learn not to mock others, as you never know what lies ahead for you in the future. Be kind always. I hope you enjoyed the story. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.